Welcome back. Welcome for the first time. I'm the Freshwater Fishing Novice. My name is Moles. Today I'm attempting to answer a couple viewer questions. Here we go. Let's look at Night Stalker's question. What new techniques are you looking forward to in the next year? Have you tried Ned, hover, /Damiki, drop shot, chicken rig? The small spinner on a worm like a pooch power spinner, bubba shot, mag shaky, etc. Laughing out loud. Oh, jeez. So what I've found about finding new techniques and trying them, you can try any technique as much as you want. Personally, this is what I found. This is not an expert opinion at all. You can try any technique you want. Crankbait. Let's go back to basics. Worms, crankbaits, jerkbaits. As soon as you start moving up the ladder, there's certain lures that are easier and tougher, like more difficult to learn. So there's like more of a learning curve. Most of the time, I don't pick the technique picks me. Does that make any sense? I want to learn a frog, right? So I keep throwing a frog. It took me years to figure out how to walk the frog properly. And once I figured that out, bang, I was on the frog bite. Jigs are right up there. Like, I have a problem with jigs. Small jigs, no problem, because I'm catching small fish. For some reason, it doesn't translate in my brain to a big jig. So big jigs. I want to throw big jigs next year. I guess that's my answer. Jigs. I want to get better at jigs. All those other chicken rig, free rig, Damiki rig, all those rigs, I've heard of the free rig before. That's about the only one. Chicken rig I haven't heard of. Scrounger, no. Ned rig I've heard of. That's a lot. I don't know. I guess I'm not leaning in that direction. I have friends that are leaning in that direction where they want to go more finesse. I want to go heavy. I want to go big. I want to find something big. The jig worked for me last year for a big fish. The year before that was a worm, just on a hook, an extra wide gap hook. The more lures that I learn, I let the lures dictate what I'm going to learn about them. So I'll try every lure I have. Unfortunately, that's why I bring most of my lures with me. So I'll throw a big swim bait. Nothing happens, switch it up. No, at least you're getting, the only way I think about it is, if you're not catching fish, at least you're getting experience with that lure. You might see it come back in the water. Oh, that looks weird. Oh, I changed my cadence or the speed that I retrieve it at, and it corrected itself. It needs to be wound at that speed. I like learning small things about lures like that. I really don't have any expectations as far as lures. I'm going to throw this year pretty consistent. Worm on a hook. I'll probably throw heavy jigs into pads. I'm definitely going to throw frogs into pads. Jerkbait, I'm going to throw around rocks for smallmouth and stuff like that, or in deeper water if I need a reaction when the water's colder. Crankbaits I have very little success with, but around rocks is apparently where you're supposed to throw them. Most of the time I'm just cranking it and I can't feel the bottom at all. But I might be throwing a smaller bill from the depth of water I'm at. So like a smaller bill on a crankbait won't go that deep. You know that. What am I telling? I'm not telling Night Stalker that. I'm telling everyone else that. So a smaller bill on a crankbait, it's only going to go 2 to 4 feet and then it's going to hit the ground. Like, something to do with the bill makes, something to do with the bill. When the bill's longer, it's going to drive that lure deeper in the water. And if you have a long crankbait, I probably have someone somewhere, and like the bill's that short, right? It's not going to go that deep. Probably 4 feet, 2 feet, something like that. 2 to 4 feet, 4 to 6, 6 to 8, and so on and so forth. I always let the lures dictate what I'm going to do. Hopefully I'll get better at crankbaits. I want to do more rat fishing. I want to do more glide bait, like swim bait fishing. Hopefully I can pull something like that off. I modified a bunch of lures that I have that are glide baits so I can make them chop more, so I can get more action in a smaller area where they're just kicking back and forth like crazy. So we'll see what happens with that. It's kind of where I'm going with my lures. Let's see what Bill said. Bill, what did you say? If you're using 4 to 8 pound test, and this is referring to the fishing line, does 4 to 8 pound test fishing line mean that I can't catch a fish bigger than 8 pounds? Really simple answer to that, no. You can catch much larger fish with 8 pound test, Bill. That test is the snapping strength. A couple things are going to happen when you're fishing. Say you have an 8 pound test, your rod's going to do a lot of the work depending on how stiff it is, the power of the rod. If it's a ultralight, light, medium, medium, heavy, heavy, extra heavy. And all that means is, if you think about ultralight and then you have an extra heavy. Medium or an ultralight would be very whippy. It would be very springy. The rod would bend right over. It would look like, oh my God, what would I compare it to? I don't know. It's skinnier. Let's go with that. The circumference of the fishing rod throughout the rod on an ultralight is going to be much smaller compared to an extra heavy rod, which is going to look more like the thickness of a broomstick. It's not going to really be a broomstick thick. There's very little bend in it. You wouldn't be using 4 to 8 pound test on an extra heavy rod. The only time you'd be using a 4 to 8 pound test would be ultralight or a light rod. Medium light, possibly, if you wanted to downsize. But if you got into a medium rod, I wouldn't go anything lighter than 8 to 12, 8 to 14. I don't know. 8 to 12 is probably good. I've fished with ultralight rods before with someone else who can verify my story that I'm about to tell you. And we were in a small little creek where we were walking through it, right? And I see a deep pool up ahead of me. And I have, what was it? A 5'6" ultralight Shakespeare rod that's like $20. And I think I had I can't remember the reel. And I think I had 6 pound line on. But I flip it into this hole. And I mean, the smallest little, it was an atomic tube. And I toss it in there and let it go. And all of a sudden, I just feel something like load up and pull it. And what that was the fish, when a fish bite, they don't, ha-cha! It's a suction thing. So you're feeling your suction of that, and then you feel their mouth on the line. So that's what you're feeling when you feel it. And then you might feel pressure from them pulling back or swimming away or turning their head or something like that. 6 pound line, into this hole, ultralight rod. I hook into something, and I had to walk to it to catch it. Like, it was not moving. It was probably, let's go conservative with like 2 1/4 pounds. It was a good size to where I showed my friend, Carlton. And he was like, oh, right, man. And that's not how Carlton sells. Anyways, you can catch much larger fish on lighter pound line. The rod you're using dictates the line you need. The other thing that dictates the line and what line thickness you want or test would be the lures you're using. So some lures don't act really well on like heavy line. It would get all weird and stuff. So like the smaller lures, you want to use lighter test line. It's a better presentation. It makes the lure work better. If you're using like a frog and you're using 65 pound braid and you're throwing it into the pads, chances are they're not even going to notice that line on top of the water. They're going to be looking at the thing moving. But with smaller stuff, you don't want big, thick, heavy line like rope going to a very small thing. It's going to be very obvious to the fish that that's not real. Okay, so hopefully that's a long-winded answer to your question, Bill. So now Bill wants me to explain the concept of setting the hook, which I like this question a lot. So that's going to depend, again, on the thickness of your rod, the power of the rod. Ultralight rod, extra heavy rod, completely different setting styles. So let's start with ultralight. So ultralight, you're going to be throwing very small lures. I don't know if you guys can even see how small that is. Very teeny. I mean, just a digit on the finger of the thumb. So you throw an ultralight lure out there, right? This thing is bendy. Well, this is actually a medium rod. So ultralight's even thinner, bends over way more. I mean, it could bend straight over like this, you know what I mean? Like a U. So it's out there, and typically you're going to feel it tug, and you're not, if you go to set the hook, I mean, you can go crazy, right? But the rod's just going to bend. So really what you want to do with ultralight, treble hooks, stuff like that. Treble hooks across the board. The fish are going to bite it and get hooked, and all you have to do is lean down and reel it. So you feel a bite, you reeling, right? You're reeling as you bend over, reeling, and then just keep reeling. That's all you have to do with treble hooks. You know, maybe you don't want to keep it up in the air like this. Maybe you want to keep the tip down at the water so it's bending and fighting the fish in that direction. Ultralight, same kind of thing. Like, you don't have to give it this because the rod's just going to bend over. So I use small hooks and just 2.5 inch plastic trout worms, which I've talked about 1,000 times. Maybe not on the internet. Anyway, toss that out. There's no weight. So it goes 10, 15 feet in front of you, maybe. So then you just watch it. I'm using like a size 10 circle hook or octopus hook, and that's wacky rigged. And as soon as I see that white worm disappear, I hit it. Like, I hit it just as hard as I do with a heavier rod, but the rod just bends over. So all really you're doing is putting it through his cheek. So you just need that much power to get it through the fish's cheek. Smaller fish, paper mouth, maybe a lot easier. Then you start stepping up. So ultralight, light, even medium light, you're not really jamming that hook home. Sometimes with a medium rod, you can't even do it. So let's go up to a medium power rod. Doesn't matter if it's spinning or bait casting. You toss your stuff out there, let it do its thing. Now you're going to feel like a pull. Like, it's going to feel like something. Like, if you just feel tension, like, okay, I just hit a tree. Like, it's going to be a lot different. It's going to drag the weight when you hit like a rock or something like that. You're going to be like, oh, it's just stuck on something. It doesn't feel like anything. But with like a live aquatic animal, like a fish, what's going to happen is that fish is going to suck it in and then turn its head and move or go do something, and you'll feel like what the hell? And the fish is still wants, hey, I want to hold on to that thing. So you'll see the tip go like this. You'll feel it like if you put your finger up on the rod right here, you're able to feel it before it hits this part because this is all cushioned right here. So if you just put a finger up there, or you can hold it up here, it doesn't matter. But for a better grip, I like to do this and just have my finger on it, right? So I can feel it down here before I can feel it in this very soft EVA foam, or this foam on the rod. So with a medium rod, you're going to wait to feel that tug. And the thing that I like to do when I set the hook is, now this kind of spans the gamut here. If it's not a treble hook, if it's a single hook, not a wacky rig, like an extra wide gap hook, possibly a frog. Toss whatever, we'll get to frogs in a second. I toss my extra wide gap hook out with just a stick bait. I think I showed you guys how to rig that worm up nice and straight last time. I let it sink. Boop, boop, boop. First, I've checked the fall rate. So I'll pull out the length of my rod, put it in the water, count it down. How long does that take to get down? Where am I chucking it? How deep do I think that is? Or you can just wait until your line goes slack, and then you're on the bottom, and you can just kind of reel up that slack. So it's more of instead of a bow, it's going to be more of an angle at the water. So then you know exactly where your lure is too. So doing whatever with the worm, no big deal. You feel that pressure like something's grabbing it, right? Like, oh, I haven't moved it and it moved itself, or you see your line going left or right. That's a good indication there's a fish on there. You might not even felt it pick it up. So at that moment, what I do is I see the line get tighter than I'm not doing anything, right? So the line just gets tight. That's not me. That's a fish or something else, a turtle, who cares? Anyway, you think you have a fish on. The line gets a little bit tight. Maybe you feel this, in your hand. Oh, geez, lean into it. So they call it bowing to the fish. I've heard it from, I don't know who it was. I can't remember. Mold. So you bow to the fish. So you're up here like this, right? Your line's down, it's bowed. You reel it up, it's kind of tight. All of a sudden it gets really tight. When you feel it get tight, the moment you feel it get tight, give to the fish. Lean over. You want to lean in and let that line get tight again, right? Same time, you're kind of reeling down a little bit, like maybe 2 turns, depending on what's happening. Lean in, you feel another tug, and you jam that thing home. And this is with like a medium heavy, a heavy rod, when you're using big single hooks or a frog. With a frog, it's a little different. Let's talk about the frog for a second. Chuck your frog out. You're working it back, right? Boop, 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 boop. I've had a lot of questions about how to work a frog because, I don't know, I figured it out finally. You're walking your frog, which is we can make a whole video on the cadence of walking a frog and the technique. Probably do that on water. You're walking your frog back. It's cutting back and forth, right? You're stopping. Over the pads. Boom, huge explosion. The worst thing you can do is immediately try to set the hook. So here's the problem. That's the problem, trying to set the hook immediately. The solution to this is, if you think about it, if you have to separate your brain from the action at that moment. Let's think about when you catch a fish underwater. You throw your worm out, you don't see that fish hit it. So you don't see that initial strike. What you react to and how you set the hook is you feel the tension on your rod, you lean in, you bow, wait for more tension, set the hook. Now with a frog bite, you're going to see that explosion. You're not going to see him eat it. You're going to see him come up, right? And a lot of people will set that hook and pull it right out of the fish's mouth. I'm guilty of this. Like for years, I've been guilty of this. So what happens is toss your frog out there, walking it back. Boom, big explosion. Same thing, lean in, bow to that fish. The problem with frog fishing I found is you're working that that frog so quick. Bow, 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 bow. Do, do. You're reeling. Do, 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 do. You have to get the timing down. It's like patting your head and rubbing your tummy. I can barely do. So you're working that thing quick, and then all of a sudden something happens and you have to stop. Like immediately stop your active movement. Exhale. I saw Tyler's Real Fishing. He made an underwater video where he threw a frog out. I don't know if this was doctored at all, but he's on the boat and he counts down to 8. The fish still has the frog after it's initially come up and exploded. He just waits. The hardest thing about frog fishing is waiting. Waiting is the hardest part. So toss that thing out, working it, reeling it, working it back. As soon as it explodes, think about that worm that you've been fishing with. You haven't felt the tension. When you see that explosion, lean in, stop reeling, wait for that tension. When you feel that fish on it, lean in again, and then it's almost like hitting a baseball. Boom! back as hard as I can, thunk, and you'll feel tension where that fish is just not moving, but you have locked it in with those hooks. And then it's just a matter of cranking it back and not losing that fish. At least that's what I found. Frog fishing is pretty fun if you get the hang of it. Takes a lot of practice, a ton of practice. Let's get to my last question here. The last comment I got was from Larry. I think Larry's new to the area. He was asking if I know any good lakes around this area, which is clearly Concord, New Hampshire. I know plenty of lakes. The lakes region is only like 20 minutes away, but there's plenty of good fishing in Concord. We got the Merrimack River. Actually, there's a bunch of different river systems around here. Contoocook? Yeah, that's a thing. But there's tons of big ponds, and it depends on what you're looking for there. I'm assuming you're using a boat. Otherwise, you'd just be walking to places, which is heavily wooded. I don't know if PA is like that. Anyway, if you want to meet up, we can go find a fishing hole. I can show you where some fish are. I plan on doing a lot of looking around this year. That was one of the bonuses to coming back to this area. Now I get to explore all the water that's around us. I know about the Merrimack. I know a little bit about the Suncook, but I get to focus on these bodies of water now and kind of branch out from here. That's a big bonus to having to move back to the capital of New Hampshire. The heart? I don't know if it's the heart. What's the center called? The brain? No, it's just the capital. Concord, the capital of New Hampshire. What is this, a commercial for Concord, New Hampshire? Anyway, thanks for watching this week. Hope you guys learned something, hopefully. Hope you have a great weekend. I'll catch you next week.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this,